Okay, so in this video, we're going to pass some variables to our template. So we're gonna get some information from our script, we're gonna pass it to our HTML, and we're gonna use it here. So for this example, what I'm gonna do, just to remind you where we're at right now, let me open this. So far we have this app. We just enter first and last name and choose the application and hit submit. It basically adds to our spreadsheet over here. So that's where we are. And what I want to do right now, I want to do a little modification to this. So this drop down right now shows these 4 options. So what I want to do, instead of having those 4 options baked into our template, which are always whatever's in here, hard-coded in our HTML, I want to basically take this spreadsheet, add a new tab, and I'm gonna call this tab Options. And what I want to do here, basically just type my options. So what we want to happen, we want to be able to just come here, create a list of whatever options we want. So maybe more, maybe less. And we want to just grab this information from this spreadsheet and populate this drop down using those options. So to make that happen, first of all, I'm going to go back here. So this is our HTML. I'm going to talk about a few different things in our HTML that we need to understand before we can even get to passing variables here. So if you remember, I did this little script which kind of runs inside of our HTML, and I used this whatever syntax this is to be able to run this function include. And this function is not a built-in include function. You create that function. If you remember, I made this function in my code right here. There's that function. So I'm able to run that function inside of my HTML and get some results and just populate it right here. So when you run this script inside of your HTML, there are a few different syntaxes for this. So one syntax is, well, let's just do something like this for a test so you can see how this kind of works. So I'm just gonna make an H1 a heading. Let's make it empty for now. That's fine. So that's going to be a heading on top. I'm going to get rid of this. So that's why I don't really care if this is inside of a div or row or anything. It doesn't really matter. This should illustrate my point. So what I'm going to do here on top of that H1, I'm going to create this script. And this script allows me now to run JavaScript inside of this. Now, if you pay attention, it's not the same as what I have here. I don't have this exclamation and equal sign in here. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to write some meaningless JavaScript. I'm just going to say variable title equals that should do it. So that should run this, whatever this JavaScript is in here. And that should just set this variable title to this text hello. Now I want to be able to use whatever that variable is in here in this H1 to output that result. So to do that, I'm just going to go here and create another script like this. And if I just type title here, which is the variable, right? And I just run this, nothing should really happen. So I'm just going to save it. Just go back here and refresh. So see, we have this empty space here on top as a title, but we can't even output that title in here because this is just a variable. So there's nothing in here that says to output that variable. So to make your variable to kind of output on the screen, you will have to use this notation same thing with an equal sign. So now that I have this, I'm saying print this on the screen. So if I save this, I go back and refresh. See, now that says hello because I'm able to output that variable on the screen. Now, if you pay attention, this one is a little different because it has this exclamation in addition. And the reason you have this exclamation here is because if you remember the way I was doing this include, I was creating this function that was rendering some HTML text. And I want that HTML to be used as HTML and not as escaped HTML. So that's why I'm using this syntax. So let me give you an example, I guess, for this. So if I do this, see, I'm adding some HTML as a text inside of this title. I'm going to save this and I go back and I refresh. See, it outputs literally the text. So it's just that whatever I type in quotes, because it's not really interpreted as HTML. As a matter of fact, I'm going to use I tags to make this more visible. So again, go back, it's still going to be the same thing. It's just going to be these I tags that are not rendering as HTML because we're escaping the HTML in this case. Now, if I go here and do this notation with exclamation sign, save this, go back and refresh. See, now it renders as HTML code. So we don't escape the code, we run the code as is, and now it's tilted. So that's the difference between either using that exclamation sign or not. And now since I'm passing some HTML code, I need to use that to run it as HTML. Now you should try to avoid using this exclamation as much as possible, especially if you ever deal with users input, because users will enter all kind of stuff that you don't want to run in your script. So if you have user input you're working with, you always want to use this notation without the exclamation sign to interpret it as basically text. So I hope that makes some sort of sense. So now that we know this, we basically understand that we either run our JavaScript right here in our HTML just by using this script tags, just like in this line 14, or we can output something like a variable on the screen by using either this notation or this notation, one being with HTML or with script, and the other one being just escape. So now I'm not going to do this variable title here. So I'm still going to keep this. And if I go back now, there is no title. So see, we get this error because title is not defined. And I'm going to try to pass that title now from here, from my code. So to pass a variable to template, what you have to do, first of all, I'm going to break this down into a few different lines. Instead of just writing this return as a single line, what I'm going to do first, I'm going to set a variable. Maybe TMP is fine. And I'm going to set that variable to, for now, I'm just going to move the whole thing. So now what I'm going to do, I'm not going to evaluate this right away. I'm going to take this off, and then I'm going to run that on this variable TMP. So that's going to run this, right? And we can also, I guess, store it in a variable, or we could actually just return this. That's fine. So now I'm returning this variable. So this should not change anything. So this should just run the same thing, and we should get the same exact error. Title is not defined, but the code runs the same way. We just basically did an extra step. But the reason I'm doing this is that because I did this extra step, now I can take that TMP, that template service that I created, and just set some properties on this. So I can create a property title and say this title should be my title, something like this. And then I'm gonna evaluate that and return that with my doGet function, which renders the page. So if I go back and refresh this, see, now it says my title because I was able to pass this title to my HTML, and now I'm able to use it right here. Now the thing is that that variable that I want to pass is going to be not a single piece of text. I want this to be an array, and I could pass multiple things, right? I can pass that, and I can also pass something else. I'm gonna say list, and this list is gonna be, let's say, an array of a couple of things. So I'm gonna just keep this, I guess, kind of short, something like this. So it's an array of 2 elements. And now it's gonna be a variable list in our HTML side over here that we can access, which is gonna be an array. I'm gonna scroll down. See how here I have all of these options that I'm rendering? I'm not gonna touch this choose your app thing. I just care about these options below. I'm gonna get rid of those. And here on top, I'm gonna create a template tag. And notice this is not a template tag that's rendering anything. It's just a template tag that will run some JavaScript in it. Pretty much the same way I was setting that var title equals something in here on top. And in this template, I'm just gonna create a loop. And what that loop is going to do is gonna be a for loop. And if you remember, the for loop has this structure where you set a starting variable, and then you tell it how far it should go, and you say as long as that is less than, and what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use that variable that now we have access to, which is this list. So I'm gonna say as long as it's less than the length of that list, let's increment our I by 1, just like this. And this opens our for loop, and this is gonna close our for loop. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm just gonna move this closing of the for loop to this script tag all the way down here. Now you have to be very careful because whatever you have as a JavaScript that needs to run needs to be within these. You can't put that in here because that's outside of any script tag. So now this is just text I'm putting in my HTML. That wouldn't run the way expected. So now I made my for loop, which is just gonna keep running whatever's in here between basically as many times as we tell it to, depending on our list. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna create another script tag. Well, before I make my script tag, let me actually put that option in here because we need that option in our HTML. Because remember, this is the first option and we need to load the rest of the options here. And here, in between here, remember we need to type those options. So we need to do like GS and then Excel and then whatever else is there. I'm just gonna go here and create my brackets again. And because this is something that needs to output on a page, we need to use the equal sign here as well. Otherwise, it's just gonna run, but nothing is gonna go on the screen. And as to what I want to output, I want to just output the list I. And what list I is gonna be at this point, it's gonna be, well, the list, if you remember, is this array that I'm passing, which is GS and Excel. And the first one, which is going to be the first time, is going to be GS, then it's going to be Excel as the second time. So that's our list I. So I'm going to save this. Let's try to run this and see what happens. So this is still our title. Remember that we pass as a variable. Now if I open this, see I have those two options from my array. So I was able to pass an array and use it in here. So that's good. So we're pretty much done on this end. The only thing, I don't really need this title thing. So I'm just going to get rid of that. But for the HTML part, we're done. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my code. And instead of creating this array like this, I'm going to create that array by getting those values from here, from our spreadsheet. So I'll go back here. First of all, we don't need this title variable anymore. We do need this list, but we're going to get it from our spreadsheet. Now, the spreadsheet is still going to be the same. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to move this URL variable as a global variable here on top. So I can access it from both functions. So before I create this template or all of that stuff, I'm just gonna do this. So I'm just gonna copy those lines. So we get our spreadsheet app, we open our URL, which is this same spreadsheet, which is where we're storing this on this data tab. Now I want to grab this stuff from my options tab. So the name of the tab is different. So let me fix that. The name of the tab is not data anymore. It's options, right? Now we store it in this worksheet variable, which is options. Now we need to get our list. So I'm going to say var list equals to, and we need to get to that worksheet, and we'll get range. And I'm just going to set this range as index thing 1 1. That should start from the start. Then we need to set the number of rows, which is in this particular case 3, and the number of columns, which is 1. So 1 column. So that 1 is optional. If you only have 1 column, you don't even have to do this one, but I guess I'll just leave it there. So this 3, instead of doing this 3, we could just take this worksheet and just get range, and I'm gonna just give it the starting point, which is the A1 cell, and I'm gonna do get data region, and I want to get the last row from that data region. And the reason I'm doing this way, if you haven't watched my last row video, maybe you should, but I don't want to just get the last row from the worksheet, because if I decide I'm gonna use some other columns for other things here, I want to get this until the 3rd. That should get us the number of rows, hopefully. And to convert this to an array, we'll just say get values. Now this get values, the way it's going to return this is not going to look like this. What it's going to look like, it's going to look like this. It's an array of arrays, because that's the way we get spreadsheet things back, right? So this is what we're going to get, but that's not what I want. What I want is a basic array in here with a single list. So I could just deal with that in my, right there in that part of the script and just leave it as is. But I guess since we did cover arrays, we'll quickly just convert that to a one-dimensional array. And what I'm going to do, now this list is going to be that array. Now I want to convert it to a single dimension, so I'm going to map it. So we'll use our map method, and we're going to pass a function, and I'll do R for row. So for each row, we're going to return R0, which will be a single dimensional array. So if you haven't watched my array videos, maybe you should. If you don't understand this, that should cover that. But this will create us a variable list that we're passing to our HTML here, and we should be able to work with that. So let's test this out. So I'm gonna save this, and we'll just run it. I open this, Google Sheets, Excel numbers. That's what we get from here. Now if I go back here and I just add other, I refresh, that should automatically be in there without making any changes to our app. So it just grabs the stuff from here and we just use it. So let's just do one more to make sure this works fine. No problem. Now I'm just gonna test the form as well. So if we look at our last thing here, this is the line 6. Let's add something to this. Let's just do this one, run, everything resets just fine, and we have our new row. And I don't need this more thing, so I'm gonna take that off, refresh, and there we have it. That's our app script. Now there are a couple of different ways to do this. One way would be to just pass the array to here and then render that array right there in this piece of code. Or the second option would be to build this in our code and just pass the final thing to here as one single variable. So let me do that. So that's what I would probably do if I was creating this, but who knows, whatever works for you. So once I have this list, which is going to be this list, what I want to do, I want to just create that option thing, remember? And instead of passing this list over here, let's just set this to A for now. I'm just gonna go back and just take this same thing, and I'm going to do var HTML list array. As I'm mapping through this, instead of just doing the value, I'm just gonna create my string right here in my HTML. So I'll do my option tag, and this is now going to be as text in here in this code. I'm going to add whatever text we grabbed from the array, and I'm going to concatenate the closing option here. And what this is going to accomplish, so let's just, I guess I'm just going to keep this to what it was for now because I don't want to confuse you more, because now we're going to get errors. So I can show you what's going on. I'm just going to revert this back so it still keeps working the way it used to work until I replace this with what needs to be replaced with. So this just go back to what it was. So now if I refresh, this shouldn't change anything, obviously. That's good. Now what I'm going to do here, I just want to basically just log this so you can see what this looks like. So, and if I refresh this, if you remember, this function is going to run, which should also log that. We have an array. The first option, see Google Sheets with this option tags. We have the second option, the third option, and the fourth option. But this is just an array of elements. What I want is one final result that's going to be all of them combined. And I'm going to do that by simply using method join. I want to join them by using basically nothing in between those tags. So I'm going to join them with this empty quotes. Maybe I'll use single quotes just for a match for this line. So I'm going to refresh this. So let's see what this is going to return us. See, now it's just one long line. It's not an array. There are no brackets. It's basically just text with all of this option stuff, which is all of those HTML things. And we don't need new lines in HTML. That doesn't do anything. So now we made this. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pass that to my template. And I have this extra L here, which I need to get rid of. So I made this list right here. I'm going to pass it to my template. And the name of the variable is going to be list in my HTML side. So now instead of doing this for loop here, I'm just going to get rid of that. And I'm also going to get rid of this. I'm also going to get rid of all of this option stuff because we're creating that in our script side. And I just need to render that list here. But remember, I cannot just render it like this because if I do this, it's going to just render this list as text. We want it to now work as an HTML because I'm building that HTML dynamically. So now I'm going to use this exclamation sign and save. And now if I refresh, that should get me exactly the same thing. And this keeps this side a little cleaner. So we just have this list here without all those in and out brackets. But for now, this should do it. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.